skin, girl, me honor you. And you know bleach out your skin. You know use no chemical to look like a browning. Girl, me honor you. Say you not bleach out your skin. You not use no chemical to look like a browning. Them a bleach. Them a bleach out them skin. Them a bleach. He look like a browning. I honor you. You not bleach out your skin. You not use no chemical to look like a browning. Oh. Praise the Lord, everybody. I'm sorry. I had a little dead air. Something was going on. But I fixed it. I need to, perhaps, there's something wrong. Perhaps I need to just stop announcing when I have issues on the air and just, pretend like I know what I'm doing, like the Trump administration. And admit to no fault, admit to no mistakes. Anyway, let's recoup here. This is the Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio, AM 1680. Today is July 15th in the year of your Lord, 2019. I'm broadcasting on Q4 Radio, AM 1680, out of the city of Chirac, state of Illinois. You can also hear me if you are not within the city limits of this sanctuary hypocrisy that we call the city of Chirac in the state of Illinois in the United States of America. You can also find me live and direct on q4.org, QUE, the number 4.org, also on the TuneIn app and iTunes Radio. So we out here. You can find me almost anywhere on the globe that the World Wide Web reaches. So that's pretty extensive. So you can share. Let people know. Get the word out. Tell the people them. Because me honor you. Say you not bleach out your skin. You not use no chemical if you look like a browning. Anyway, we started the morning off with a little cocoa tea, the original Rikers Island mix. Everybody knows the Nardo Ranks. Me no not like Rikers Island. You hip? But I also don't think that the original Rikers Island by Coco T, the reggae crooner, doesn't get enough play. So I want to share the original because many people think are totally, because the remix was so dope for Rikers Island. The original Rikers Island tune gets overshadowed. But when I heard that, I started thinking about Nardo Ranks, and I was missing hearing Nardo Ranks, so I had to come in on the other side with a Nardo ranking. In between Coco T and Nardo, I played an excerpt from the famous, legendary speech that Dick Gregory gave at Kent State back in the 60s I'm in the early 70s, prior to, or just after the Kent State massacre. They brought Dick Gregory there to tell white folks about America. And it was really, I wish I could have played more of it because he was speaking to a predominantly white audience about white folks' bloodlust, about racism, racist atrocities, and basically about how insane the American capitalist system is and how white folks are just totally harming themselves, the ecosystems, and not just black folks when it comes to racism. And the white audience actually started rebelling. And this old racist white woman got up and started screaming at Dick Gregory and demanded that this ungrateful Negro say something about the good features of America and all the great things, what makes America great. Make America, white folks been talking about make America great before they even made America, before they finished enslaving Africans and genociding the natives. They've been talking about the downfall of America. They just have this, Western culture has always been an apocalyptic culture. But anyway, Dick Gregory handled it very, very professionally, But this is young Dick Gregory. Y'all know the old Dick Gregory. But Dick Gregory was around for a minute. Shout out to the ancestor. Anyway, let's proceed on because I cannot be long, but I must be strong. I got a lot to talk about, and I know I'm not going to get to it. I've become realistic after 3 years on the air. We're approaching my third year on the air with Q4 Radio. And the whole time I've been here, I've had to pretty much pay to work here. I don't really get enough revenues or enough public support to sustain the show. So I would like to at least have enough to, if not to employ a staff or to even pay myself at least enough to where I don't have to pay to work. But that's up to y'all. Y'all let me know. But I digress. I'm coming up on my third year on the 22nd. I won't be on the air on my third year because the day I started this show 3 years ago was also my son's birthday, July 22nd. So I won't even be in town. I won't even be within the Chicago city limits on my third anniversary show. Regrettably, I wish I could be here. But hopefully, maybe I can get John to rebroadcast on my anniversary for the day closest to my anniversary show. Maybe he'll rebroadcast my very first Bro Diallo broadcast. We'll see. I'll holler at him. They got all my stuff here in files archived. But anyway, moving on. I want to talk for a second about these Trump raids, man. Everybody's going for the okie doke. Let me tell you something. These Trump raids have nothing to do with stopping or slowing, reversing, or ending illegal immigration or the presence of illegal immigration. Trump doesn't give a damn about illegal immigration. He doesn't give a damn about the territorial integrity of the United States. He doesn't give a damn. How do I know? Because number one, Trump hires illegal immigrants, has always hired illegal immigrants from Mexico, from Poland, from all over. All of Trump's major construction projects, all the Trump towers, all the Trump hotels, all the Trump golf courses have had illegal immigrants working there. Trump didn't get an erection for violating the human rights of refugees and immigrants until he became a Republican. And guess what? Trump only became a Republican in 2008. Prior to 2008, prior to Barack Hussein Obama winning the Democratic nomination for the U.S. presidential race, Trump was a Democrat. Trump even admitted that he's given millions of dollars to the Democratic Party. There are pictures all over the internet of Trump piling up with the Clintons. He loved the Clintons. The Clintons been to his crib. He's been to the Bill Clinton's crib. They kicked it together. They go to each other's children's weddings and all of that. Donald Trump was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding. Donald Trump and Bill Clinton both rode on Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile airplane. They homies. They stromies from back in the day. Trump is a bona fide racist. But what we don't seem to understand about racist, it's kind of like when they rewrote the Pledge of Allegiance and they put in one nation under God, indivisible. When they put one nation under God, because it was one nation, indivisible. That was the Pledge of the United States. But during the Cold War in the 50s, they inserted one nation under God, indivisible. Because they thought that communists, the godless communists, could be weeded out. So when they go to schools and they would go into the churches and they would go to baseball games and they would have people stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, they felt that communists would not be able to say one nation under God because communists were godless. We're atheists. That's one of the many things I respect about communists, although I'm not one, although I've been called a Marxist and a communist all my life because people in the United States think that if you don't accept the status quo, you must be a communist, a godless communist, as if there are many divergent ideologies, many economic systems that people embrace, cultivate, and advance. But Americans are very, very simple people that know very little besides warfare and mass consumption. But I digress. They felt that a communist would be weeded out. So you go all over America and make people say the new Pledge of Allegiance. And then the communists would stand up and say, one nation, and then pass out because we just can't say under God. If you're not a true patriot, if you're not a God-fearing American, you wouldn't be able to say that. And they literally thought that would help to weed out communists in America because communists were coming to overthrow America as capitalists were all over the world overthrowing everybody and everything in the meantime. And you'll notice that paranoid people that are engaged in cutthroat behaviors tend to think people are out to get them. So thieves always think somebody is going to steal from them. Two-timers always think their significant other is going to cheat on them. And invaders and imperialists always think someone wants to invade an imperialism against them. So anyway, that's what we tend to think about racists. We think that a racist will disintegrate if they have contact or interaction with black people or non-white people. And I tell y'all all the time, racism is not about proximity, it's about power. We always think that if we're in contact with a white person, then how can they be racist? Or we can end racism by getting physically close to white people. And that racists will not hire a black employee, will not marry a black spouse, will not enjoy black music or native music or Mexican food. That is not what racism and racists are about. Racists seek race-based power over other people. When racists have power, they can be as racist as hell and hand over their little white babies, their little Aryan babies, over to a black woman to suckle that white child at their breast. So it's not about proximity, it's about power. And I have to keep driving that home. So yes, Trump has always been a racist, but he's not been an anti-immigrationist. I'm sure when Trump was on the pedophile plane with Epstein, if there was a black child or a Latino child or an Asian child, he'd pick any one of them. He didn't just go after the white children when he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein at his mansion on his pedophile island or flying around in Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile plane. So anyway, these raids have nothing to do with really curbing immigration. What they are about is feeding his base. I'll tell you again, Trump was voted into office by the white racist majority. Racist white people are by and large undereducated, and now, as a result of their undereducation, and when I say undereducated, I just don't mean, yeah, they have degrees, and you black people are still out here fighting like hell to get your black kids into these good white schools. But education is different than indoctrination and training. In these good white schools, white people are heavily indoctrinated, and they've got a lot of skills. They go work for Google, they've got STEM, you go into the hospital, all these white doctors. I worked with white physicians for well over a decade on a daily basis, all over the country. I literally worked from New York to California and several places in between in the health profession. And you'll find highly skilled doctors that don't know a damn thing about anything besides their particular skill. I know one of the best examples of this is Ben Carson. Ben Carson was not only a brain surgeon, he was a brain surgeon innovator. But the man doesn't even understand basic scientific principles. He doesn't understand geography, he doesn't understand geology, he doesn't understand biology. How are you a brain surgeon and you don't even understand biology? Because he's very well trained, he's very heavily indoctrinated, but he's not educated. Education is the ability to understand, not just your ability to execute an action, or that's training. Education, an educated person is always learning. It's always cultivating, it's always able to process thoughts and understanding. So whites, as a by and large, are very well trained. But also on the flip side of that, whites in the United States are one of the most heavily indoctrinated. We always understand and talk about how black people are brainwashed. Nobody is more brainwashed than the white majority. Just because you're brainwashed does not mean you're going to be impoverished or you won't have certain access and certain mobility in the society. Being brainwashed means that you accept things that are patently untrue and disprovable, but you accept them anyway. Being brainwashed and indoctrinated means that you are immune to facts and evidence, even if they're laid out before you and undeniable. White people still believe that the Republican Party is a party of family values. They believe that the Republican Party is the party of law and order. So that tells you about how cognitive or intelligent the white majority is. But anyway, Trump was elected by the white majority to bring them back jobs. He is supposed to reinvigorate the coal industry, reinvigorate the steel industry, and he was supposed to return the United States back to the 1950s of high industry, manufacturing, a reduction in environmental regulation, and the expansive growth of the white middle class. That's what he was supposed to do. He can't do that. The United States will never go back to that world. So what Trump is trying to do is, since I couldn't fulfill my economic agenda, my economic commitments and promises to the white masses, what I can do easily is fulfill my cultural program and my demographics program. So I can't return the post-World War II New Deal economic prosperity to the white, what they call the baby boomers. I can't do that. But what I can do is give them a spectacle. And so we're coming up on an election year. And Trump cannot run on his economics. Even though Wall Street is doing great, you still have farms. White farmers are losing a lot of money. And Trump has been bribing white farmers and buying white votes all over the Midwest. Go back and listen to the Bro Diallo archives, where I keep telling y'all the numbers, the billions and billions of dollars that they're just dropping. They're literally dropping billions of dollars from Air Force jets in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas. Trump is going all over the Midwest, the Northeast, and the dirty, dirty South, and giving white farmers boatloads of money because he has failed to reinvigorate. He's going to these rallies in the old mining towns, through Appalachia, through northern, California regions. Trump is running all over the country trying to rally his base. And he has done nothing to advance the promises he made to them in economics. The only people he's kept his economic promises to are the white 1%. Trump has done more to benefit Barack Obama, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Puff Daddy, and Dr. Dre. Trump has done more for Snoop Dogg and Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey than he's done for the red-blooded trailer park redneck economically. He's benefited the economic 1%. Trump's economic policies do more to benefit Jay-Z than they do Hoss and Billy Bob. And Trump cannot get elected without Hoss and Billy Bob, even though secretly Puff Daddy and a lot of these other celebrities who come up with these voter die plan, paying even 50 cents. They voted for George W. Bush. And they tend to vote Republican because they know Republicans are going to cut and slash their taxes and allow them to keep more of their fiat unearned stolen currency. But that's another whole nother topic. So anyway, the whole point of this Trump raid is to distract the white masses from the fact that Trump has sold them out economically. Trump did not drain the swamp. Trump brought a whole bag of mosquito eggs and dumped it into the swamp and increased the level and brought a whole bucket of leeches and dumped more leeches into the swamp. So the swamp that is the corrupt Washington, D.C., the corrupt federal government under Trump has become more corrupt, more parasitic. There is more theft of the people's revenues and the people's resources taken away from the people and redistributed amongst the elites. So Trump can't run on economics. Trump can't run on his military record. Remember, Trump said he was going to do away with ISIS in 2 months, and ISIS has expanded. Remember, Trump said he was going to pull out of Iraq, pull out of Afghanistan, pull out of Libya, and end the Syrian conflict and all of that, and Trump has lost. Remember, Trump said he was going to subdue North Korea. Remember, Trump was supposed to punk Iran. Even Trump was going to crush Cuba. All of Trump's military adventures, all of Trump's military and international policies have been crushed. Every time Trump goes on an overseas trip, he makes an absolute fool of himself. The UN Assembly literally laughed in his face. So on an international scale, and you'll notice, go back and watch the feeds. Go look at C-SPAN. How Trump demeanor changes when he's abroad. When Trump is walking around in his redneck trailer park rallies and people are MAGA and build that wall and lock her up, he's got a certain swagger. But when he goes overseas, go look at when he went to Saudi Arabia. His shoulder slumps down to it. All that braggadocio and all that bravado is gone. He's a punk. He's a chump. He's a sucker. Like most bullies and racists are. Like Malcolm X said, the Klan is cowards. One of them never come after one of you. So he humbles himself. So anyway, all this ICE raid stuff is the fact that he didn't do economics, he didn't do military. All the nonsense he was spewing to the white majority has fallen on his face. And the only thing he has done, and the only promise he has kept to the white majority is racism. That's all he's got for them. He's got nothing else for the white majority. But fortunately for him, that's more than enough. White people will starve their babies if it means they get to, stick it to the liberals and stick it to the coloreds and stick it to the foreigners and stick it to the Muslims. White people will sacrifice their own well-being in order to attack us. They've done it throughout history. And the white majority know this. So Trump is doing ICE raids. Number one, the thing about a raid, I lived in the black community in the 80s and early 90s when they first militarized the police, when they set up these crash units, and when they first started giving the police all these demilitarized military equipment. And they literally took tanks and they took the big gun on the tank and they put a steel flat plate and they were ramming into people's houses. These SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics teams of the local police department, were running up on people left and right every day. And I lived in a housing project. And they just kicking in random people's doors all over my housing project, all through neighborhoods. I literally would get on my bus because I had an aunt who paid for me to go to private school. So I had to get up earlier than everybody else in the ghetto, put on this corny ass uniform, and then go get out on the bus because, I couldn't catch the city bus. I had to go out and go all the way to the other side of town and go to this damn private school. And on the way there are many times I'd see these raids happening, these early morning raids while I'm sitting on the bus. And I see them running up in random poor black people's house. They got babies in diapers out in the cold. They got mothers, fathers, aunties, cousins, grandmas, all in handcuffs, lined up. Got people on their knees on the concrete, sometimes in the heat, sometimes in the winter. I'd see these raids happen all the time. And one thing about the raids that I learned growing up in a community under siege during Bill Clinton's drug war and Ronald Reagan's drug war. I came up under Reagan, Bush 1.0, and Bill Clinton's height of their drug wars. That's when I was growing up in grade school and high school. They never announced it ahead of time. When the feds come to your door, they never announce ahead of time. There was one time they came. Fortunately, they didn't kick in our door. But one time the police bum rushed our home. And they were looking for one of my uncles. But it wasn't a drug raid. It was about some theft of some contractor's equipment. I ain't gonna snitch on my uncle. He didn't. He was detained, questioned, and released. But the one time they came to our house, they didn't announce we're going to this house. We're coming after. They never announced raids ahead of time. If a police agency, I don't care if it's your local cops, the feds, the ATF, the DEA, or ICE, if they are announcing ahead of time that they're going to bum rush your show, that they're coming to get you, or doing a nationwide raid, it has nothing to do with law enforcement. It has everything to do about media and propaganda and psychological warfare. And that's what this is. This is red meat for his base. This is Trump saying, hey, I kept a promise to you. I told you I was going to put the niggas back in their place. And the way he put black folks back in their place, talking about shithole countries, he's doing everything he can to undo all of Obama's policies. And he's disrespecting the Obamas at every turn. He's telling off these black congresswomen, telling them to go back to the country they came from. So he's putting black, he's making overt racism acceptable again. And he's like, so I'm going at the blacks. He went at the Native Americans. I know y'all act like Standing Rock never happened. It's gone in the history books. He told them to clear the Native American water protectors. And so he went and he put black folks back in their third world countries and put black folks in the ghetto. Remember, even when he was on the campaign, your communities are crime ridden. Black people, you live in despair as a result of Republican policies. But they want to pretend like it's Democratic policies. But if you actually look at the specific policies, what institutions wrote up the policies, because U.S. political policies doesn't come from the president. It doesn't come from the congressman. U.S. political policy is written by think tanks that are funded by multinational corporations. And it doesn't really matter who's in office, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in office. You'll find that they tend to get the Council of Foreign Relations, the Heritage Foundation, Harvard, Yale, these Ivy League institutions. They write up government policies and laws, and then they give it over to politicians. Politicians execute and implement the laws, but they don't conceptualize the law at the federal level. You do have some politicians constructing policy at the state and city level, but at the federal level, it all comes from these elite agencies. But again, another rabbit hole we're going down. But they say Trump said black people live in ghettos, black people, and he tries to blame the Democrats because he's a liar. Even the policies advanced by the Democrats came out of the Republican Party, like NAFTA, like GATT, like the omnibus crime bill that came under Bill Clinton. It was constructed by the Republican Congress. Because remember, presidents don't make laws. Presidents don't make laws. Go study 5th grade civics. So if you don't, and so the Republican Congress advances something under a Democratic president, and then we run around thinking it is a Democratic law. That's just how we do. But I don't blame us. I do blame us, but I won't blame us. Whatever. All I'm saying is, all I'm trying to tell you is, this raid ain't got nothing to do with immigration. This is what they call scapegoating. It's scapegoating. It's red meat for the base. And so white people get off on it. There are white people in Dixieland, northern white liberals, who are looking at all these immigrants, all these black and brown people, because y'all also don't understand. They're going after Haitians. They're going after Nigerians. They're going after Ghanaians. They're going after African people as well. But the African community isn't as well organized as the Latinx population into getting our narrative out. And there are white racists masturbating to this suffering that are getting off on this, even though it will not benefit them. If you go back and you look at the passing of the Welfare Reform Act, white people were just getting off on the thought that poor black mothers would lose their housing vouchers and lose their welfare checks and be cut off of food stamps and cut off of Medicaid and underfunding poor health care for poor children, the CHIP, the Child Health Program. White people were getting off on it like, yeah, cut them off. In welfare, white people were getting sexual gratification from black suffering. Way back in 1994. And then you turn around and say, okay, white man, they cut off all this welfare, and lo and behold, white man, that your own daughter was receiving public benefits. Your grandmother was getting the welfare. Your niece was on the welfare. Your cousin was on the welfare. But because they made welfare a black issue and gave white welfare in blackface, you were getting sexual gratification from the thought of black people being harmed. And you're like, to hell with my niece, my cousin, my brother, to hell with all the white people on welfare. If this means I can get a coon or two to lose his benefits, so be it. It's the same thing now. But the white people who were not on welfare, Did they receive a major tax cut? No, their taxes went up. All of the promises that they thought they would receive from denying poor and struggling people, families and children, welfare, plunging even more black children into poverty, but all the benefits that they were promised never actualized. It's the same thing. This immigration thing. All the promises. Oh, when we kick out the immigrants, there'll be more jobs. There'll be less crime. America will be whiter. None of that's true. So it's suffering for elite profit, but the masses get no benefit. But again, like I said, Trump, who just became a Republican about 10 years ago, is doing this because he has no options. Trump attempted to start a war. He wanted to go to war in Iran. He tried to provoke a conflict with North Korea. But like I told you, America has nowhere left to invade. Obama took up all the good invasions. He even wanted to go into Venezuela. He even tried to start a beef with Mexico, and I'm going to put illegal tariffs on Mexico. Obama took up all the good invasions. There's nobody left to invade. AFRICOM was already going before Trump got into office. So Trump tried to do a war so he could be a war hero president. He's just out of options. All Trump has is base level racism. I feel bad for him almost. So that's what this raid is about. And I know black people, y'all think once they kick out, there are some black conservatives, some black irrationalists who think once all the Mexicans are gone, then the white man's going to come knock on our door and give us them good jobs. But you don't understand, the reason they hire illegal immigrants instead of hiring black U.S. citizens is because they can underpay them, pay them less than the federal minimum wage. They don't have any rights, and they don't have to invest all the money into protection in terms of OSHA protections. If they're injured, they just send them off. So you really should not envy migrant workers, number one. Number two, there is no deficit in migrant workers. In fact, they are when the government starts to more aggressively hound and harass illegal immigrants, the people who employ illegal immigrants are even in a better position to exploit their labor. So the only way that you can benefit from the harassment and expulsion of illegal immigrants is if the government switched its enforcement policy from harassing migrants to arresting employers. When major employers of illegal immigrants like Donald Trump, if Donald Trump gets arrested, if they find he's got an illegal immigrant working at his Mar-a-Lago resort, like he did, had several illegal immigrants working at his Mar-a-Lago resort, if they arrested Trump, because that's what they do in Europe. They focus on the employers, not the workers. Just like in Europe, they focus on, for illegal prostitution, they don't focus on the prostitute, they focus on the people buying the sex, the people who create the market. But anyway, that's the only way you could even conceptualize gaining some benefit from oppression. But let me tell you this, when you turn to oppression to help relieve your oppression, because guess what? In Nazi Germany, many Jews were enthusiastic when they saw the emerging Nazi party going after the communists. Because as you know, many of the Jews were bankers and merchants, right? And the communists wanted to take away the wealth and private property of the bankers and the merchants. So the Jews were like, yeah, get those bankers. And also, the Nazis targeted the disabled, and they targeted the homosexuals. And if you read the Torah and you know Leviticus, you know they don't like that. So many of the Orthodox Jews, many of the early policies of the Jews, of the Nazis, were embraced by the elite Jews and Jewish conservatives and even Jewish Orthodox. You can't make this stuff up. There are many Jews like, yeah, we've had our problems with the Nazis, but by and large, the Nazis are getting things done. They're making the trains run on time. They're getting rid of these anarchists and these communists and these people who want to get in the way of our economic interest. But let me tell you something about oppressive, genocidal regimes. They always level up. They are not self-regulating. It's like cancer. It's like losing weight with cancer. I want to lose weight, so when I get malignant cancer, I lose a lot of weight. And I've been wanting to lose weight for years. That's how, when you get jobs, when you bring employment to the black community by violating the human rights of refugees. And black people think that will translate into economic opportunity for black people. It's like a person who wants to lose weight and they are happy that they got a malignant cancer because it allows them to fit into a dress that they bought or a pair of jeans that they bought. Or they can wear their old denim slacks from high school because I've lost 30 pounds since I developed this cancer. But let me tell you something. After ICE and after all the camps, after all the resources used to basically expel the refugees and the migrant population, do you think they're going to decommission? You think all those ICE agents are going to resign from their position? All they ever do is just find a new group of people to harass and murder. Remove. So that's what these ICE raids are all about. And speaking of the ICE raids, let me give a shout out to the late Willem Van Sporen, who is a anarchist, leftist, John Brown revolutionary. I'm going to say more about leftists and anarcho-violence. This is actually a phenomenon reborn. If you go back to the 1920s, to the progressive era, the era of the Wobblies, they're international workers of the world, anarchist and leftist violence was a pretty common thing. Because the anarchists and the leftists understood that the capitalists, that the oligarchs were not going to give up anything without a fight. They were not going to cede anything without a demand. And so, if they had a problem with an elite white person, they blow them up or shoot them. But then the left embraced nonviolence. And the right never, ever, ever, ever embraced right wing. You can't be right wing without being pro-violence. So now we have, for decades, right wing militias killing and doing all this stuff. The left is starting to abandon its nonviolent stance. The white left, not the black left. The black liberals are still on that king delusion. And I think this is a good thing. This is wonderful. I applaud leftists arming themselves. And I mean true leftists, not liberals, but true far leftists, white anarchists, white communist, white eco-terrorist, PETA, pick up the gun. It's time to go. I think we're at that time. We're at that epoch in history. And this is a good segue because I don't have much time. I still have more to share with everyone. But I want to talk about black vulnerabilities. Why we suffer. I mean, black is almost synonymous with suffering. Almost synonymous in this country. Every social indicator, from housing, poverty, healthcare, education, labor stats, incarceration, premature death, crime, violence, homicide, almost every social indicator. If y'all want the statistics, let me know. I can give them to you. But everywhere you look, black people, we are not performing well. And yes, we do have our role models. We do have our inspirational figures that we can look up to, that allow for us to keep hope alive, that allow for us to believe that we can achieve if we're willing to sacrifice. But still, we come to find European researchers have determined for us, because American researchers don't get the funding to do this type of work, but European researchers have discovered that the United States has the most rigid class structures in the modern world, in the Western world. That social mobility in the United States is akin to social mobility in medieval Europe, during medieval Europe, meaning that, very simply, that the class you were born into is more likely than not the class you will die in. Almost 90% of people, if you are born into a certain socioeconomic strata, you will die in that socioeconomic strata, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many degrees you secure. Because that is what conservatism is. Conservatism means to maintain the status quo. It means to keep everything as it is. What white people like to do is call for radical change. And by radical change, they mean steal everything and set up a power dynamic where they can legally, justifiably keep everything they stole. So they go from being radical, meaning that let's gather everything up, take all the land, take all the gold, take all the free labor. And then they say, okay, that's it, shut it down. Now we want to be conservative. We want to conserve what we have. We want to maintain the status quo. And the United States is one of the most conservative countries, not just in the world, but in human existence when it comes to economics. And that is why I say, and you should repeat this, and you should let our people know this at every opportunity. You have a greater potential to elevate your class status than you do to elevate your individual status. Meaning that if you are born in a certain socioeconomic strata, you should work to empower that entire economic and socioeconomic strata, not just to exit. It's better for you to empower, and it's more rational for you to empower your class than to exit your class. And I know this sounds unrealistic. We think we have a greater potential of being Jay-Z than being Malcolm X. We think that it's better that we can secure the bag, we can jump shot, sling a crack rock, maybe spit some dope rhymes, or maybe go to school, or maybe come up with an invention. And we can individually elevate ourselves, and we can get up to the position of Money Mayweather and all these American success stories. And I don't blame you for believing that, because the U.S. media apparatus invests billions and billions of dollars to create and cultivate that illusion into little black children. And those little black children grow up to be big, stupid black adults who still believe that, hey, I'm going to get mine, you do you, player, and promote this stupid materialistic individualism that is causing us to collectively suffer and only allowing less than 1% of us to individually elevate. But the name of the show is Why We Suffer. Understand Black. It's supposed to be understanding. I'll fix that in the post edit. But understanding black vulnerability. So I'm going to talk about some things that make black people vulnerable. Because a lot of times we have this certain disconnect, and I don't understand it, where black people, I encounter so many black people that understand things are bad for black people, but they totally disconnected from anything material. Like, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, the police kill us. Why do the police kill us? Because we black. And because they're racist. And so I say to black people, let me tell you something about racists. Racists have a broad category of people they don't like. Guess who the white racists hate more than they hate blacks? And again, you can go to Reddit, you can go to 4chan, you can go to Stormfront, you can go to White Knights or Gray Wolves. They got all these racist sites. And even though you hear all the anti-black racism, anti-Latino racism, anti-immigrant racism, there is one group that white racists in America hate more than all of us put together. And that is the Jews, the Zionists, the Zog. Zog stands for Zionist Occupied Government. White racists believe that the Zionists, and a lot of black right-wingers also, believe that the Jews control everything, the Illuminati, blah, blah, blah. The Masonic... They have these childish Lex Luthor supervillain analysis. that's not really rooted in anything. But a lot of you'll find a lot of so-called conscious black men. They read stuff like Behold a Pale Horse, Pawns in the Game, uh, The Unseen Hand. They listen to Alex Jones. So a lot of black militants get a lot of their understanding from white ring racists. That's why they all sound alike. You listen to Umar, and you listen to anybody from Focus on the Family or Alex Jones or the Proud Boys. They have a lot of the same analysis and a lot of the same complaints and a lot of the same agendas, except you either dip it in bleach or dip it in chocolate. But in the end game, ultimately, they have the same worldview. That's why ADOS is so cozy with the right-wing Republicans. But I continue to digress. Let's return to the ultimate point. Let's get all the way back because I keep looking at, they got this big clock here. I should show it to y'all. And I want to get to some point. Let me just lay it out. Black vulnerability. Why are we vulnerable? And what are we vulnerable to? There's so much here. Should have given myself more time. I shouldn't have played that Dick Gregory thing so long. But what we're vulnerable to, but anyway, let me get back to that point because I didn't. White people hate Jews. The white racists in our communities, cops, hate and fear Jews more than they hate and fear black people. But they don't shoot Jewish kids. So it is not their hatred that drives them. They also don't like Asian people. They have all these racial slurs for Asians, but they don't shoot the Asians. Why? Because the police, regardless of their personal feelings, are controlled by the status quo. They don't enforce laws, they enforce the status quo. So there are hated populations in the United States that are higher on the socioeconomic run. And the police, as racist as they are, understand that certain demographics and certain populations they cannot harass, brutalize, and murder with impunity, even though they hate them. So they don't kill us because they hate us. They kill us because we are vulnerable and that they will not face the same consequences that if they went and shot a Hasidic Jew. There was a time, we just came up on the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, where homosexuals could be openly brutalized by the police. But since the Stonewall riots and the gay rights movement and all of that, now that they can't, even though they hate the gays, you don't find white gays. Now black people, black LGBTQAI, they still got to deal with their black side. So they can harass black LGBTQAI people within almost impunity as long as they do it because they're black and not gay. So there are populations that are hated by racist cops that racist cops do not treat like all other people they hate. Because it is about power, not about who they like and who they don't like. The police are able to exercise restraint against populations that they're racist against if they understand that there will be consequences. That if that demographic is not vulnerable. So this is about vulnerability, not about policies. It's not about training. It's not about learning to love one another. It is about power. And so black people are vulnerable. And it's not just the police. Bankers discriminate against black people. But them same white bank staffs, loan approval officers, them same people that hate blacks, they hate Jews too. But when the Jewish people walk into the bank, they don't suffer from the same discrimination. Housing as well. There used to be signs up all over America. No blacks, no Jews, no Irish, no Mexicans. I once got suspended off of Facebook because we were talking about the civil rights movement and who the civil rights movement impacted. And we always see the no blacks allowed, colored interests, white interests. But history has erased all of the no Irish allowed, no Catholics allowed, no Jews allowed. And yes, the Protestants hate the Catholics in this, and it's still beefing in this country. In certain areas like Boston, Protestants and Catholics freaking hate each other's guts. But Protestant cops don't shoot Catholic white citizens. It's about power and vulnerability, not just the hatred. We focus on changing their hearts. But let me tell you something. Non-racist cops harass and brutalize black people. Black cops harass and brutalize black people. So even in the absence of personal individual animosity and racism towards black, the system is structured where anyone who is vulnerable will be harassed, brutalized, and murdered with impunity with this system, because it is about power and vulnerability, regardless of people love or hate you or not. That's just like Trump ran around this country talking about Islamic terrorism, and the Muslims are going to kick out all the Muslims and stop Muslims from coming to this country, and Islam is a horrible religion. And he got on a plane and flew to Saudi Arabia, and his ass was eating falafel. And he was in the mask bumping his head because he was in a position of vulnerability. When he interacts with Arabs and Muslims who have power, he acts like he's got some damn sense. Yeah, he still hates Islam. He still hates Muslims. He still hates Arabs. He hates them, but he acts like he's got some damn sense. Go look up Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. You'll see him kissing the ring of the Sultan. You see him dancing the Seder and dancing around doing the traditional Saudi Arabian Arabic dances. Trump was all over. Assalamu alaikum, my brother. Assalamu alaikum, my brother. Trump didn't want no smoke. Did Trump have a change of heart? Did Trump discover a newfound appreciation or love of Muslims? No. He understood, listen, I'm in their house. They have the power. It's up to them whether or not I can get on this plane and go back. So that's how you deal with racism. You don't deal with racism by changing their heart or appealing to their love, their sense of justice and morality. You deal with them by having them understand the same ability you have to inflict harm on me, I have the same or greater amount to inflict harm on you. Mutually assured destruction. And I know we don't like to talk like this because we have a lot of lofty ideas. So before we can even deal with black vulnerability, we have to understand and accept that black people are vulnerable. Some black people don't want to accept that we're vulnerable. Some black people are like, I got a U.S. citizenship. I got a social security number. I got a good job. I got a degree. I got a BMW and a mortgage. So a lot of black people think that they are full-fledged American citizens. Not to mention that Jews in Germany had all that and more. And when there's a change in the political climate, everything you got could be taken away in a day. Holla at Bill Cosby if you don't think you can never have enough money to escape being black. You can't buy your way out of this caste system. You can have more stuff. But so, we are vulnerable. If you don't accept that you're vulnerable, some black people don't even want to accept that they black. They Indians, they Hebrews. So there's a lot to this. So a lot of black people who are vulnerable, who are black and vulnerable, won't even accept. Some black people don't accept that they're black. Some black people don't accept that, hey, I'm black, but I'm not vulnerable. I'm good. I got mine, like ASAP Rocky. And you know what? The fact that we don't even know how to deal with them is another component in our vulnerability. So I know before I could even slide my premise past you, I have to establish who's black, what's vulnerability, and y'all make me work really harder than I should. But anyway, I want to talk about some specific things that make black people vulnerable. And then I have to say, what's attacking us? I have to talk about the capitalist agendas, the white agendas, the alien agendas. There's a lot of various competing and cooperating agendas operating for black people. And when I say black people, I mean the Africans and the African diaspora. And whenever someone sits in a government bunker or sits on a military base or sits in a corporate boardroom and comes up with a plan, and black people are either the target of that plan or black people either obstruct that plan, And so they have to deal with us in a way that counters our best interest. We are vulnerable to that, and we don't have the means of counteracting that. And I don't care if that's stealing resources from the African continent or gentrifying a traditional black community. It doesn't matter. We don't seem to be able to harness the ability. We're very good at highlighting the atrocities. We're very good at pointing out the injustices. We're really good at coming up with hashtags and memes. But we suck at countering and subverting these agendas. Why is that? Why we suffer? Why are we vulnerable? And before I can even talk about the specifics, what do you want from me? I'm doing the best I can to. But the number one source of black vulnerability, I'll start from the top, is menticide. Menticide right now is the greatest threat to black people. And the reason why menticide is the greatest threat of black people to black people is because menticide opens us up to all other threats. Now, if you listen to the Bro Diallo show, I know you're frustrated because you're probably thinking, damn, Bro Diallo said the number one threat to humanity is climate change and global warming. Melting of the ocean, polar ice caps, acidification and rising sea levels in the ocean, mass extinction and the loss of biodiversity. If you listen to the Bro Diallo show, I tell you that's our number one issue. Bigger than white supremacy, bigger than racism, bigger than everything else. That's the number one thing. And it's true. But what's a asterisk is, because that's our number one problem, anything that gets in our way and that obstructs us from addressing that number one problem is the number one problem. So the number one problem is menticide. The 1.0, 1.1 problem. So it's 1 and 1. There's 2 ones in here. You know, we got fractions. We're a little sophisticated. We can deal with we don't have to just deal with whole numbers. So yes, that is, depending on the discussion. But the number one threat to black people specifically is menticide. Because menticide not only stops us from being able to fully grasp the scale of global warming and climate change, it also prevents us from constructing appropriate actions and agendas. And even when we have appropriate actions and agendas laid out before us, it prevents us from coordinating and cooperating and moving forward on those solutions. That's menticide. So menticide not only stops us from being able to address the large-scale problems, menticide prevents us from being able to deal with the local, pedestrian, personal problems that we have. Menticide is the systematic destruction of a group's mind with the ultimate agenda being the extermination or extirpation of that group. You destroy people's minds, their capacity to think and function on an intellectual level so that they will be vulnerable to you physically, politically, economically, socially. That's what menticide is. Some of the characteristics of menticide, as Dr. Bobby E. Wright identifies, as a people become anti-analytical, ahistorical, and anti-intellectual. Our capacity to think and comprehend and grasp phenomena are obstructed. And the fact that if you cannot diagnose, if we don't have the intellectual capacity to understand our problems, then we will never be able to intellectually construct viable solutions to those problems. And even if a few of us can construct those solutions, we can't not convince the masses of our people to join with us. And we don't even need the masses. We cannot convince enough of our people to hold to the agenda. And even if we do all of that, because of menticide, even if we get the 5 to 10% of the black community we need to advance agendas for the interest of our people, 90% of the menticidal masses will attack us and subvert us. Our oppressors will be able to employ our own people against us. Right now, they are arming Africans to recolonize Africa under AFRICOM. They used Obama to implement U.S. imperialism and to subvert and to obliterate black financial gains that we've made over the last half century. They used Colin Powell, a black man, Clarence Thomas, a black man, Ben Carson, highly educated black man, to attack us. So we have all these obstacles that are a direct byproduct of the systematic destruction of our mind. This destruction is carried out by confusing ongoing trauma with misinformation and mass indoctrination through the media and educational system. And a traumatized mind, a traumatized individual reverts to what they call the limbic brain or the reptile brain. You have certain parts of your brain that deal with instinct. And you have what they call the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. You have basically your consciousness and your instinct. You have the ability to think and rationalize, but then you have just the ability to respond to stimulus. And those two parts of the mind are equally important. You can't be too cognitive or too intellectual that you can't respond on it. You can't have to think. You know, if somebody kicked in this door and was like, I'm going to kick your ass, bro, Diallo, for all the stuff you saying on the air, which has happened. They didn't kick in the door, but I get those threats, but I digress. I can't sit here and contemplate, who is this person? What is their motivation? What do they intend to do? I'm going to have to act, fight or flight. The adrenaline's going to rush, and I'm going to jump over this table and bust him in the head with a microphone stand. Or do whatever else I got to do to protect myself, and I'm not going to intellectualize about it. That's what happens. But if I go home and my son is having an issue and I have to talk, I can't just act, oh, what are you doing? I have to think. So there are times where your cognitive mind has to act. There's other times where your reptilian limbic brain needs to snap into action. Time for reflection and then sometimes you just need muscle memory and throw them hands, and that's a balance. And what menticide seeks to do is to put us in a perpetual state of crisis. And when we're in a perpetual state of crisis, we become vulnerable to suggestion because our cognitive mind is not very active. When your body is awash with stress hormones and it is not properly processing those stress hormones, your cognitive mind is greatly weakened. That's why a lot of times you see when you go to church, people that otherwise got enough sense to stay out of church, they come stumbling into church when they've gone through a great amount of stress. And they walk up and give their life to Jesus and say, oh, my mama died. Oh, I was diagnosed with cancer. Oh, my man is beating on me. Oh, and the church preys on these vulnerabilities because people who otherwise have enough sense not to believe that there is a God and there is a Jesus will fall to those delusions because their cognitive brain is not fully activated. It's not fully engaged. And trauma does that. Trauma causes people to revert, not to diss babies, but I mean, if you got kids, you know they don't have very much sense. I got a 10-year-old. They don't have much sense. And he's really smart. You'll have little children that can count, that can do math. Now, my son, he can do math better than me. And physics. I mean, he gets on those books and say, Dad, you know, I look over his shoulder sometimes when he's working like, I don't want no parts of what you're doing, man. That stuff is too much. But he doesn't have wisdom. So even though he has all this information, all this data, he doesn't have the wisdom and the experience. So he still needs my guidance, even though there are some things that he knows that I don't know. So that's what they do. They keep us in a perpetual state of crisis to basically make us infantile. And this is not to diss baby, because it ain't nothing wrong with a baby being a baby. There's everything wrong with a grown woman or a grown man being a baby or being infantile. And they do this while you're still in the womb. Dr. Tom Hartman talks about fetal development and the mom's mental and physical state of mind during fetal development. And if the mom body is awash with, now there's nothing wrong. Stress is necessary for life. Now, but I've talked about that. I'm just going to go with this and assume that y'all listen to the Bro Diallo show religiously every day and y'all have archived and y'all download the shows and go back and listen to them. Because what I'm saying may seem to contradict what I've said, but you can go back and listen to what I said about the stress show. This is all consistent. So I won't digress here. But the mother's material condition sets the baby up. Mothers who are in a high stress environment, when they are pregnant, give birth to children that are prepared to live in a high stress environment. It's natural evolution. So those children born to mothers under high stress environment have lower cognitive function and higher reactionary limbic function. They tend to anger more quickly. They have higher rates of aggression because the body, our evolutionary biology, is signaling to the mother, signaling to the fetus, you are born into a world of distress and danger. And then they take that child who is born, who is prenatally subjected to rewiring of its brain to be active, to be engaged, and then they put them in a academic environment. Why won't you sit at this desk for 5 hours and look at these little symbols on the page and recite to me what I say to you? Something's wrong with you. When they find, when those children who are born into this high stress environment, when they're allowed to be given physical outlets, and they're given the proper mechanisms that speak to their nurturing and their evolutionary development, they excel beyond the little eggheads who can't sit in that desk. When a mother is in a secure environment, the child has a lower heart rate. They come out calmer. They have lower levels of adrenaline, testosterone, and stress hormones because their body is signaling to them, you are born into a calm, settled environment. And you can't come out into this calm, settled environment wilding because then you won't be able to engage and become a part of the community. And we are a communal species. We are a socially dependent communal species. So they start menticide before we are born by stressing out our mothers. Even Serena Williams, with all that money she got, she's laying on the birthing table dying. She even had a white husband to advocate for her. And they like, nigga, shut up. Nobody knows their body better than Serena Williams. She is the most highly trained, most effective athlete in the history of athleticism. And she says something's not right here. She almost died. And that stress, being in there with all them wealthy white doctors, that still look at her like, yeah, she's rich, but she's a nigga. That translates to her offspring. That's going to impact her offspring for the rest of, what does she have, a boy or a girl, his or her life. It seems like Jay-Z understands this a little better. Jay-Z and his wife went and bought and built a whole hospital ward and brought in their own experts. They had to go to super maximum extremes. If you ain't got Jay-Z money to go and buy up the whole top floor of a hospital and buy in and bring in your own specialist and pay for brand new medical equipment and go through all those extremes. Poor white women get better health care than our best celebrities. Prenatal care, postnatal care, and birthing care. So anyway, so a high stress, under-resourced mind then is bombarded by propaganda. It's hard not to kill niggas. It's like a full-time job not to kill niggas. Murder, 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 murder. Dead end street. Gangster, gangster, that's what they yelling. It's all about a salary. It's not about reality. So you hit this media, this antisocial murder music into a non-cognitive brain. Do you know that white kids listen to gangster rap more than black kids do? But they don't have the same antisocial outcome or impact as black kids because of the menticide. So black propaganda is more harmful to black people than black propaganda, anti-black propaganda is to white people. White people have their own issues, and I have theirs, and I'm not trying to big up white people and tear down black folk. I'm saying the method that the elites use to control and the agendas that they have for them and us are different. And as Bobby E. Rice said, you can't use white definition to explain black phenomena. So you can't talk about humanity because humanity has such divergences and differences and separations that sometimes you got to talk about one group and leave out the other. So black people, we suffer from menticide. That's our number one problem that makes us the most vulnerable, that we have to address. We have to make our people more cognitive, more rational. We have to make sure everything we do and understand, everything we define and engage is brought into a proper historical context. We have to promote and reinvigorate African intellectualism. and historicism. And we have to analyze everything. I don't care if you're going to the grocery store, read the labels on the food you buy and understand how they impact your anatomy and human physiology. When you're driving down the street and you're looking at these billboards, when they make a black mermaid and a black 007, think about it. And I know your people around you are going to not like you very much. I know. You negative. Why are you so negative? You hate everything. If people aren't saying that to you on a semi-regular basis, you're not doing something right. You need to have a radical, in-depth critique. Yes, everything is against you in this society. Yes, they're against you. Yes, it's the white man's fault. And all the things that they tell you that you shouldn't feel, that's exactly what you should feel. Because we are at war. Dr. Claude Anderson said there's only 3 explanations for the state of black people in the world. Number 1 explanation could be that black people are cursed. Some divine supernatural force has cursed us. Number 2 explanation is that black people are biologically, genetically inferior to other races of people. Or the number 3 explanation must be that there are people systematically creating conditions to make sure black people are at the bottom of the socioeconomic strata for their own benefit and profit. Now, if you believe that black people are divinely cursed, which there are a lot of black people that do, the whole black Hebrew Israelite faith is predicated on the fact that black people were cursed by God. And then there are people that believe, not many black people, but there are a lot of people like, you go read, I have a copy of the bell curve. We might have to break down the bell curve or dissect the bell curve. But it's not that popular anymore. In the 90s, it was all over the place. That we are inferior, and therefore we should be grateful to serve at the feet of our race superiors. But if you know history, if you're not menticidal, you know history, if you are intellectual, if you have engaged in proper analysis, you'll know that our status is the direct byproduct of deliberate subversion of black people's interests. But we're taught as a people, you're not supposed to be negative. You think somebody's against you, you're paranoid. We need to stop focusing on the white man and focus on us. And we don't like to take personal responsibility and say all this nonsensical stuff. Oh, my time is up. Lord have his mercy. I'm going to have to come back to this. Why we suffer, understanding black vulnerability. Number 1 thing is menticide. But that's not it. But no, everything I say about black vulnerability and why we suffer, everything I say from this moment forward, you will have to understand that it is a byproduct of menticide. If it is not menticide unto itself, what I say is a byproduct of menticide. So we're going to come back with a part 2 and maybe even a part 3. But I will be gone. I will not be in town, just so you know. As I wrap up, I will not be in town. I will not be on the air Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday. So it might be Friday after next that I'm back because I'm headed to pick up my son, who tomorrow will be returning to the United States. He went on his first international trip this summer, trying to raise up a Pan-African revolutionary warrior, let him get out into the world and understand the world a little better than I did at his age. So anyway, he's coming back to the United States, and we're going to pick him up in New York City and celebrate his birthday in New York. He was born in Brooklyn, New York City, where they pay me. He was born in New York, so he's going to be able to spend his 17th birthday in the city of his birth. We got love for New York and love for Brooklyn, man, but gentrification, damn, it's hard to go there. It's like looking at a corpse of a city. But anyway, if I'm not on the air, I'm going to do my darndest to make sure we do at least a Q&A, and maybe I can broadcast from the hotel room or something. So we're going to stay engaged. We're going to keep with this Pan-African revolutionary analysis. Please, what do I do? Please support, please engage, please participate. You can become a Patreon supporter. And when I get back, a lot of work, the African World Coalition work will begin and accelerate. The African World Order clothing line will come back online. I will be on top of getting out my Patreon gifts. Believe you me, after this last extended trip, I will be back and the work will continue. And hopefully the quality of the work and the intensity of the work will improve if we get the necessary support. Shout out to Johnny. for keeping me on my square. And I will see y'all soon. But again, I'm also across all the social media apparatus too. You can find me across social media, but I'm not broadcasting on Facebook anymore. I mean, they keep suspending my account, so what's the point? I'll get people used to listening to the show on Q4, or get people to watch me on YouTube. But that's it. I can't hang with Facebook no more. They just keep suspending me for the most absurd reasons. So anyway, Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio, AM 1680, iTunes apps, iTunes Radio, and Q4.org. What did I do? Oh, the outro music cut. All right, I see y'all when I see y'all.